You're listening to A Second Look on the Orca. A second look is an opportunity for all of us to reflect on past events, unpack their significance, and discuss their long-term implications. A second look is intended to give thoughtful reflection on issues that made the headlines and elicited strong responses as a society. What did we think then? What do we think now? What have we learned? And now, your host, Justin Goodrich.
Welcome to another edition of A Second Look here on the Orca.ca. I'm your host, Justin Goodrich. Each year on August the 9th, we recognize National Peacekeepers Day. Established in 2008, National Peacekeepers Day provides an opportunity for Canadians to express the pride and respect they have towards personnel with the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as well as provincial and municipal police forces, and, of course, Canadian diplomats and civilians who have worked in support of international peace and security operations. Since 1948, more than 125,000 Canadian peacekeepers have participated in dozens of international efforts all over the world. Joining me today to take a second look at the evolution of the Canadian Peacekeeping Initiative is Ben Maure, an inspector with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and author of Leading on the Edge, True Tales from Canadian Police and Peacebuilding and Peacekeeping Missions Around the World. Welcome to the program, Ben.
Yes, good afternoon, Justin, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Well, Ben, first and foremost, I've read the book. I'm absolutely enthralled by it. Tell my listeners a little bit about who you are and why you're so passionate about peacekeeping and international policing.
My message today here is about, yes, my passion about peacekeeping, but it goes further than that. It's about my passion for policing. Now, my message too is that policing is a very noble career. I totally understand that these days been very difficult, right? We've been police around the world, as a matter of fact, have been under scrutiny. And you know what? For good reasons. But I think a message is being lost somewhere that, like I said, policing is a very noble career. I've been listening to some of your previous podcasts and with some colleagues that were invited. And I know some of them were asked really tough questions about the future of policing. What I want to say also, and actually in discussion with other colleagues as well, some have become hesitant to advise the new generation of people about getting into the police. And you know what, like how many careers out there will give you so many opportunities like policing has? For example, I was 24 years old when I joined and grade 12. So from there, I was given an opportunity to grow and learn, well, first of all, I polished my English for one thing, but also an opportunity to learn Spanish, from the employer. Most important, I learned, actually, I got a bachelor degree in technology that was supported my organization, and I moved on to a master's degree, right? And that was fostered by policing, right? How many organizations give you that opportunity? But it doesn't stop there, because it does come when you work and then when you study. There's some sacrifices, of course, that comes with that. But the organization has given me other opportunity, like, for example, this mission that we're going to be talking about, or the mission in the book, but also my mission in Guatemala in 1999. It came as a result of study of Spanish and all the growth opportunity that I had with the policing. So I did work in general policing. I did drug investigation, and I did the United Nations mission in 1999. Didn't stop there, you see, because the organization gives you that opportunities to grow. Became a diplomat in the Dominican Republic for 4 years, working within the embassy and learning all about, foreign affairs and foreign diplomacy and so on. So what career offers you that?
Well, I think you've certainly addressed, by virtue of your comments, why you're passionate about sort of international policing in so much as it's well, as you say, it's not boring. But wondering if you could just maybe expand just a little bit more about sort of perhaps your evolution into international policing, and then from there talk about Canada's contribution to peacekeeping, in terms of numbers and outcomes and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So really from a Canadian perspective, our engagement within the United Nations as far as police goes really started in Namibia in 1989. And then since then, we've sent roughly about 4,000 Canadian police officers in a variety of missions, about 33 missions over this period of time. And I would say the main goal of, or overarching goal, was really to bring democratic policing to fledgling country and towards also developing and building a more secure world as a result of that. And I think that's been our engagement from a Kenyan perspective in all these missions.
So tell me then a little bit about this book. What compelled you to author this book, Leading at the Edge?
So as you can say, I'm passionate about international policing. So the book, there hasn't been a lot of books about what police do overseas and how we promote democratic policing. So I had this idea when I finished my, my master's degree at the University of Fraser Valley. I had Professor Erwin Quinn, Daryl Plekas. And these individuals also inspired me to continue. And I really developed a secondary passion for writing. And I thought, hey, what a better idea if I were to interview people who have been to United Nations missions and tell me their stories. What could we learn about that? And so that's how it started. So I, through a colleague of mine, Mr. John Bewis, who retired recently, so he was able to put me in touch with a police officer who wanted to talk about their mission. And this is one of the challenges, and it's the whole idea about the second look. There were some challenge of getting people to talk about those missions, because sometimes yes, it's fantastic to go on a UN mission, but there's also some very difficulty. You can see there's some people who have seen atrocities abroad and how they've dealt. So it's not everyone who wanted to talk about it. And it also, when you work for an organization, the last thing you want, and it includes me, is to talk about like an event or about your mission and then bring your organization into disrepute. That's the worst thing that can happen from my perspective. Now, having said that, the organization, and including the RCMP, will take some criticism. And that's what's important. That's what I found out through this whole book research project. The organization is okay with that, right? But it's got to be balanced. It cannot just be bad. And so I think that's what also enabled me to come up with these stories, and then to be honest in these stories, because it wasn't all pinky and rosy. And the organization said, yeah, we're fine with that, right? And it took a while, because I guess the good thing about this book, and one thing about, if I mention, that's very unique about this book, is it got licensed by the RCMP Foundation. It had to go through a rigorous review process. And at the end, they say, yeah, we're good with what you wrote in there. And as a matter of fact, we give you permission to license the book with us. So it's got RCMP logo on it, which you don't really find on any type of book out there, especially from a member that's still working for the organization. So I challenge your listener to try to find a book with RCMP logo on it. So it's quite unique for that. But anyways, the stories of the book, we do talk about Namibia, Croatia, Guatemala, Kosovo. So Guatemala is my own mission. There's Kosovo, East Timor, Sierra Leone, Palestine, Sudan, Afghanistan, and last but not least, it was Haiti. Right? And again, actually, both Afghanistan and Haiti have been in the news lately sadly, for another earthquake, and we know what's happening in Afghanistan. So.
Well, and certainly I'd like to take a second look at some of those missions in particular as we sort of allow listeners to journey with you in the stories that you share, so they can have a full and wholesome appreciation in terms of what Canadian peacekeeping and peacebuilding is really all about. And the first thing I would actually like to talk to you about is Afghanistan. Now, in chapter 9 of your book, you talk about the Afghanistan mission. We know it was a dangerous mission, that a sizable number of Canadian military lost their lives, and police officers were injured in that mission. And now we look at Afghanistan here today, and in light of recent events, the United States pulling out and so forth, and the Taliban subsequently regaining control of these areas, it sort of begs the question: was it all worth it?
Yes, that's a very good question indeed. And what's been happening lately in Afghanistan is outside the scope of my book, because my story was really in 2009 in Kandahar. Well, when I say my story, it was back then Constable Gregor Aitkins, who was in that mission. And yeah, he faced tremendous challenges over there, like IEDs, and went during foot patrol and all that. I haven't talked to Gregor lately about how he felt about what's going on lately, but I can share something. I've been talking to other officers who were on that mission, and well, what they've told me is what's happening over there is really for them gut wrenching, and some haven't been sleeping well at all. Right? There's I totally understand. It's super difficult, especially after everything, like the danger they faced over there. Some, well, like if you read the chapter 9 of my book, you'll see that Gregor, for example, like some of the challenge he had over there, he could have lost his life easily, with everything. But he was, if I can go just before I finish to answer this one, I'll just go back to 2009 with Gregor, what had motivated him to go to Afghanistan. Gregor was married, and still is, but at that time had a 1-year-old little girl. And his motivation to go to Afghanistan was to go help I would say the promotion, not the promotions, but also to help to help women grow and have opportunities in Afghanistan. And that was his first. He had a little girl, and says he really wanted Afghan women to have the same opportunities as we have in our world, in Western world. And that was his motivation. So now that, especially with what we've seen in the news, with the US pulling out and the Taliban taking more, seizing Kandahar, now Kabul, yeah, it's definitely gut-wrenching. There's a very good interview, I would say, on CBC. Actually, it's a few days ago. It's called Canadian Veteran on Legacy of Afghanistan. It's from CBC News. You can get that on the internet. But to see the fall, so from their perspective also, is to see the fall of Afghanistan has been extremely difficult for them. Like I said, some were on second tour over there, and they literally risked their lives over there. And some, according to that interview, some were currently deeply struggling with the decisions, right? So where does that all leave us? Well, another officer told me, listen, the way I'm dealing with it right now is like, I was there, we did our best, but how do we move on and close that chapter? Is that what we did over there, we brought Afghan hope. We showed them how things could be. And I have to leave it like that, with the hope that it's not going to go back into, and that the rights of women will not be curbed and so on and so forth. And so we're not going to go back into antiquity, right? I don't have an answer what's going to happen in Afghanistan. I don't think too many people have. But we can know, but in his word is that we brought them hope. They know that there's better out there, and I guess time will tell. But yeah, it's a difficult question, yeah, for sure.
Well, I very much value what you said about the notion of hope. So taking a second look at peacekeeping in terms of its evolution, but also taking a second look at some of these missions and recognizing that no matter what happened after you left, what can never be taken away is that with your presence, you gave people hope. And that's pretty extraordinary, Ben. I think it's very extraordinary. One of the one of the other chapters of your book that very much intrigued me, and I'd like to take a second look at, is your mission in Guatemala. Now, our listeners, likely haven't read your book, though hopefully they'll pick up a copy after listening. So, for their sake, I'll simply summarize it by stating that you were tasked with, among other things, investigating human rights abuses, some of which were taking place as a result of some of the domestic police, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you look back at your Guatemala mission and the challenges you faced to bring hope in the midst of also bringing operational change, what is what do you think of when you look back now? And would you have perhaps done anything differently? And what were some of the primary obstacles attached to that?
Yes, for sure. What I could say is like one of the challenge that in my mission in Guatemala in 1999, I had quite a few, but one of the big one I had is there was 12 peace accord in Guatemala, and one of them was to rebuild the new police and also uh, ensure that human rights were being respected and the returnees of refugees, just to name a few. So part of my job was also to ensure that the police was not committing human right abuse, and then trying to implement this democratic policing to I would say a philosophy to the Guatemalan police. So one of the things that was difficult for sure was I had kind of two roles. One role was to build to build reports with that police and to encourage them to go that direction of democratic policing, because they were trained by the Guardia Civil, retrained. The police officers were retrained. Interestingly, in Guatemala versus El Salvador, because they had two conflicts about the same mid-90s. You remember El Salvador? Well, I think the UN had the approach that uh, the Salvadorian police should be changed and then train a new Salvadorian police. Well, I guess they learned from that lesson. It was probably not the best thing for a variety of reasons, and I'm not gonna get into this, but they didn't do the same with Guatemala, and they decided rather to retrain the old police officer, rename the police force. And so they retrained the police officers with human rights course and so on and so forth. And it was because it was Spanish, then they asked the Guardia Civil from Spain to do that. And they did a great, fantastic job. But some of the challenge we had was to to ensure that, yes, democratic policing was being instituted, but also and develop report with the new police, but also investigate them if there were human right abuse complaint. And I think the challenge for me was like they never knew when I was going to, let's say, the local police. They never knew which hat I wore, and
Mm.
right, am I there to investigate them or am I here to try to build report? And that was one of the things that I found difficult at the time. Now, the UN has evolved a lot, especially since my mission, because also we were reporting our challenges through to my chain of command, to to the officer who was in charge of my mission, for example, and the Canadian officer who was in charge of my mission. So we'd report that, and of course they reported directly to the UN our hierarchy, and therefore so things have evolved and changed a lot. So as a result of that, and I think the UN is doing it a lot better nowadays, as far as maybe having police officer this type of adversarial role within a mission. And one thing I know for sure that the UN is doing a lot better is when you get to the country, there's more there's more courses on local culture and dangers and so on and so forth, what you can expect. They're doing a much, much better job. Even before you leave the organizations, whether it's the RCMP or even the Montreal Police, they have these preparation courses that are that targets the culture, the challenge that you may encounter in a country. And so they're doing a much better job. If we look a second look at my mission back in 1999, I had an incident in a small town of Polugua, whereby well, I almost got killed over there. But so it's in my book, the story. Obviously, I'm here to talk about it, so I had a happy ending. But what is interesting is when we got to Guatemala, there's a lot. The cultural aspect was explained, but not necessarily intricately to the point where we could have prevented a whole situation to happen. And what happened in that little town of Polugua is there was a car was stolen by 3 individuals, and the town who basically, it's a small town, and you have to understand how it worked back then. It was in the mountains. They were culturally, there's the culture in the mountain. You got Guatemala. Really, Guatemala is you got many cultures. You got 22 different Mayan cultures in Guatemala, and sometimes they don't speak Spanish, and they don't understand the laws, and they're very distrustful of police, and for obvious reason, especially back then. So keeping that in mind, the town caught the 3 thieves, but the vehicle wasn't there. So they basically decided that if we were not to get the vehicle back, we're going to burn the people alive, and that's it. It was self-justice. And so the police got there with the prosecutor to talk to the to try and convince the town not to harm the people that they had caught. And it's not like the police could go and take these people away from the crowd. It was a much more complicated. So they agreed with the crowd that, hey, we're gonna leave 2 behind, and we're gonna take one of these accused, and the police and the prosecutor will go with him and recover the car and bring it back. And then after that, the victim from that town would have his car back, and we will prosecute the accused. Fine and dandy. So we, as the United Nations, we were there with the police initially to see how to monitor the situation, because it was another of our job to monitor how it's going. And you know what, Justin, it was so quiet in that town. People were listening. Fine, okay, so there's no problem. The police goes and the prosecutor go, and so we remain in the town, me and a colleague lawyer from the UN. And I think that's where we should have known better as far as the culture. And so we were left behind, and on one of the public place, and very few people, maybe less than 10 people, probably. I'm just going back. And one individual who was on a loudspeaker, talking to the few who were there, saw us and said, "Hey, can you explain what the United Nations is doing in our town?" And my colleague, out of good faith, decided to say, "Yeah, I'll explain it," and took the loudspeaker and sealed their fate for the next several hours. Within no time, about 500 people showed up in that corner, and then we were surrounded, couldn't go anywhere. Our car was maybe 100 meters, right? But there's still there was no threat at that time initially. But now you're surrounded by 500 people, and within no time, then more people came in. Within an hour, it was 5,000 people, and we couldn't go anywhere. 5,000 people. They were coming from other villages. And what got really bad was that there were some intoxicated people among the crowd of women, children, men, intoxicated male. And one of the intoxicated male came close to us with a machete and says, "You know what? You guys are going to stay here until the police comes back. And if they don't come back, well, just cut your head." And he's brandishing his machete in our neck, right? So I was like, okay, well, that's not good. And then,
that's quite the understatement. That's not good. Quite the understatement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You look at all this and say, "Ooh, things are difficult." The mayor of that town was totally pro-UN, came to our rescue, And he said, and as he's coming to us, some people from his own, well, it turned out later they were from other villages, but some of the intoxicated people told him, if you get into this, we'll kill you too. And he slowly went back. So now we were surrounded by 5,000 people and all angry. And what do you do? Well, one thing that for sure that you can learn from my experience there is like remaining calm was probably the best thing that could happen. And I hold that to karate learning. When I was in Guatemala, we do have some free time as a peacekeeper. I took some karate lessons, and my instructor was into karate, of course, but also into meditation and so on and so forth. And we practice meditation and the art of deep breathing and all that. And it's so important because it's in high stress situation that you're gonna remain calm. And I think that calmness helps you to think, to be focused, and it made a difference for sure in this particular case. I'm not gonna tell the whole story how we got out of there. I'll leave that for your audience who decides to go pick up the book. But there's a lot to learn. But we at the end of the day, we hope the fact that we got out of there in one piece, to the mayor who came back and with some pretty cool ideas. And at the end of the day, the police came back with the vehicle and with the accused, and everybody was turned over. But the story of how we actually managed to get there, and also some of the further threat as the time went by, we were threatened to being burned alive, right? And I explained that in the chapter and what it was going through our mind at the time and how we managed to remain calm in difficult situations. So that's kind of about my mission in Guatemala, and lots of lessons learned as a result of that. But to go back to your initial question and having a second look, the UN has learned a lot as a result of that. And there's better training now for peacekeepers from around the world who come to a certain missions to understand about the culture, the dangers, and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, they're doing a fantastic job, but like we'll discuss a bit later about Haiti, no one could foresee a deadly earthquake, right?
Well, what you've done thus far in our time together, Ben, is you've very much painted a picture for us, which I appreciate. You've first of all, I think you've demystified elements of what peacekeeping is about. I think you've also clearly demonstrated that it's so much more than one might perceive based on watching some kind of Hollywood version, as opposed to the realities that you're sharing, inclusive of the potential dangers. But then again, the overall outcomes and benefits, and that word that just keeps resonating with me is what you said at the very top of the show, which is you've given people hope, and hope is no small thing in a day and age filled with so much hatred and so much violence and such toxicity. Hope can be something that can carry a person forward. And I just think I'm just so proud of to be a Canadian and to know that we're a country that believes in peacekeeping and peace building. And that actually takes me to my next question here, because you've mentioned Afghanistan, you've mentioned Guatemala, and you did just mention it now. I want to focus on Haiti, and as we take a second look at Haiti, we look at calamity after calamity. We look at presidential assassinations, the cholera outbreaks, the earthquakes, the gang violence, the drugs, all those things being just at the tip of the iceberg, and all the chaos that is Haiti. And I can't help but ask the question. It begs the question: is the international community, through your lens as someone with lived experience, who has been in these situations, in these countries, through the lens of lived experience, is the international community doing enough to help the people of Haiti?
That's a very good question. And let me answer this one. I grew up back in Montreal with, I think Canada, first of all, has a bit of a love story with Haiti. There's a big diaspora of Asian back east in Montreal. I grew up with a Asian, I went to school with an Asian colleague. And I think from that time on, it opened my eyes on that culture. And it was a lot of fun to be with that individual. And even at a younger age, I learned about Haiti. And I think Canada and Haiti has always had this close relationship where we love Haiti. When I was there in 2000, well, as a liaison officer, I was a diplomat to the Dominican Republic, I was covering Haiti. So I did that from 2009 to 2013. And you know what? I loved Haiti. I just love that country, the people, the warmth of Haitian. Every time I traveled to Haiti, I was like the brother who had been gone for a while. I was always welcome, and I just loved Haiti. Now, interestingly, though, with Haiti, like you've said, there's been so many calamities and president assassination and so on and so forth. Where does it leave us, right? Of course, I talk about in chapter 10 of the earthquake and how we peacekeeper reacted. I lost 2 colleagues during the earthquake. So that was difficult for sure. But what we can say that about Haiti, what I've learned about Haiti, and although what I'm going to be saying is a little outside the scope of my book, but it's important because I can say that from my perspective as a liaison officer and speaking with high-ranked Asian police at the time. It's important that as we move forward with Haiti, that we just ensure that we don't create a dependence, right? Haitians are very, very capable, but we must work with them to help them move the country forward without making them dependent. And what I mean by that is, if I go back to the earthquake, shortly after the earthquake, Canada and the rest of the world poured tremendous help into Haiti. And on one occasion, there was a program within Serge Boulian, who's the peacekeeper in chapter 10 of my book, came up with this, managed to get Canada to send tents to the police officers' family in Haiti. So some of the police officers, they had lost everything. Some have lost their family, their children, their homes. And you know what? As soon as they could, they were back to work. Even if they were not paid, they were back. It was incredible. And then some of them had nowhere to stay. So we managed to get some tents for them. It was only temporary, mind you, but at least it was some type of shelter for these officers. And as we received the tents in Haiti, or over 100 and something, one officer who was there said, well, I don't like these tents, they're a little too small, and I would like this instead and this instead. And that reaction actually upset one of his colleague, another Asian police high-rank officer, who said, you know what, we have to be grateful of what we're being given here, even though the tents were indeed not necessarily capable of housing a family of 10, but at least there were some type of shelter for the time being. And what that officer told me is, Ben, we're very grateful of the everything we receive from the international community, but sometimes, that's his word, I fear like we have become as a nation too dependent. We need to rely more on ourselves to move forward. So what I've learned from that is that whatever our foreign policy is with Haiti, I think it's important to just keep that in mind and see how can we help Haiti without just ensuring that we don't create dependency. And I think that's kind of my opinion based on my experience as a diplomat, liaison officer in Haiti, and beyond it, above everything, discussion with my colleagues back then, right? But you know what? I love Haiti. It's like I said, I've always been welcome over there. So when I heard about this latest earthquake, it was devastating news. That's all I can say.
Naturally it would be, and without sounding as though I'm just sharing platitudes, I say with great sincerity, thoughts and prayers to all those individuals who are suffering due to recent events. Then, as we start to bring our time together to a close, we could probably go on for quite a while. Probably chapter by chapter. But as we start to bring our time to a close, what is it that you want listeners to really know and understand about the evolution of peacekeeping and the good that it does? What are those final sentiments you want to share with listeners?
Well, I'm just going to go right back to the beginning of our interview and the why, because it's just not about peacekeeping and not about making this world a better place, but it's about policing. And it's about the opportunities that policing will give an individual to have a fantastic career and to be part of something bigger than the person itself, right? Peacekeeping is one avenue. It's only one avenue, but policing can do a lot. And like helping people, whatever it's here in Canada or abroad, right? It's all about the nobility of policing. And this is the message I want your audience to listen to it. If you're out there and you're a younger individual who's looking into a career that's going to bring you a lot of challenges and can help you grow and help people, well, consider policing, because it has done miracles for me. And I like I said, you can probably hear that in my voice. I'm totally passionate about it. So I think that's my final message to you, is that, and then to your audience, is that, well, just don't just listen to the negative message out there about policing, because I sincerely believe that we'll see a balance coming back. And because people know that, if you were to just defund the police and get rid of the police, society would crumble. Let's face it, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, and then people know that, but there's some people who they have their own idea. They want to put that message, but the truth of the matter is, police are still needed. We need to listen to what our community wants, to cater to our community, and that's at the core. That's why I joined in. I never joined the police just to wanted to hurt people or anything like that. I wanted to help people. I found a medium through peacekeeping. That was my passion. But you can do that also. Or I could, like I said, I could talk to you about how I did that also in country in Canada. That's for another episode. But my message to your listeners: if you're looking for a job, policing is fantastic and great. And as an added, I'll add that my neighbor is a airline pilot, professional airline pilot, and he's been flying for 25 plus years. And during the pandemic, well, guess what? He was 18 months without working, right? And he went through a really difficult time with children and all that, and that was tough. But guess what? In policing, we were blessed because we had our job. I had the paycheck coming in, and I could still help people, right? Just think about that. We went through a rough time, but policing was there for the people, and also for me. It kept me with a salary, and so I could continue helping my family and friends and so on. So that's another thing about policing. Can't forget. So that's why I'm very blessed in my career. So,
all right. The book is called Leading on the Edge: True Tales from Canadian Police and Peacebuilding and Peacekeeping Missions from Around the World. Ben, final question: if someone wants to have a copy of this book, to sit down with it and hear some of these extraordinary stories, where could they get a copy?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can download a copy through Amazon.ca or Amazon.com if you're outside of Canada. That's probably it's less than $10 for an electronic copy. If you prefer the printed copy, you can get that through Indigo's chapters or also through Amazon. So.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ben. It was appreciated hearing some stories and some context of the good work that Peacebuilding does and why it's so important. And I'm very grateful for your time today. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Well, that brings us to the end of this month's edition of A Second Look. I'd like to thank my guest, Ben Maure, for joining me. If you have questions or comments about today's show, feel free to email us at asecondlook@theorca.ca. Until next time, I'm Justin Goodrich. Thanks for listening.
The preceding program was brought to you by Alliance Public Affairs Group in association with Van Grio. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode, please email us at asecondlook@theorca.ca. Thank you for listening, and please remember to like and share.